there's the recording in progress button. So again, welcome to the September community meeting for Upstream Kubernetes. My name is Laura Santa Maria. I am from SIG Contribex, or Contributor Experience, and I am from Pulumi. Please do remember that this is being recorded to be posted publicly to YouTube. So anything you say will be up there. If you're not comfortable with that, mute your video, mute your sound, chat in the chat, and we'll make sure you're heard. Also, we do have that code of conduct. Please do be excellent to one another. As a courtesy, if everyone could please mute when you are not speaking, just to make sure that everyone is heard. And if I start noticing people are speaking over one another, I'll probably start calling on people just to help facilitate that conversation. There is a link I am just about to drop into the chat that is a link to the read-only notes. If possible, please do use those for the agenda, just because the agenda gets very busy otherwise. But however, if somebody would like to be a note taker right now, I'm going to do it. But if someone wants to volunteer, you're welcome to open up the right version and start typing for us. However, on that note, I'm going to just dive right into some announcements before we go much further. First things first, the Contributor Summit for KubeCon North America, all of the registration is now open. So if you have not yet registered, please register early, because we do want to be able to get all your swag all settled out. So go ahead and head to kubernetes.dev/events. You'll be able to navigate from there to the 2022 Kubernetes or KubeCon North America Contributor Summit links for registration. Also, the CFP is open, and I believe it closes on September 30th. But do remember, the earlier you put your stuff in, the better, because it gives everybody a chance to give you some feedback. So if you are interested in submitting to the CFP for the Contributor Summit, not KubeCon in general, make sure you understand the difference. Please do submit to those as early as possible. Any other announcements anyone would like to bring up? All right. Well, let's kind of move on here. And I'm going to skip over the release updates unless there's a release lead who would like to chime in with any quick notes on the release or upcoming release stuff. All right, let's move on to talk a little bit about the changes to the release enhancement submission process. That's the first topic we're going to cover today. And I am looking for Grace.
It's me.
Hi. All right. So Grace is going to be one of our experts. There's a couple other folks on the chat. So please, when you come on, introduce yourself, tell a little bit about what the enhancements process is, and then we'll open up the floor to discussion. But I will hand it off to Grace.
Well, thank you, Laura. Hi, everyone. I am Grace. I'm currently a release lead shadow for the 1.26 release. And one of the largest change we have in this release is how the enhancements are being opted into the release. So we are replacing the enhancement sheet with the GitHub tracking board. There's a whole blog about this that you can find on the contributor KHJA blog. So how it's going to work now is, instead of your SIG leads putting down a row of the enhancement into the sheet, they're just going to apply a tag or a label called lead opted in. And there's a script that's run twice a day that will pull these CAP into the GitHub project board. I hope that makes sense for the most part. Feel free to ask away.
And if people don't end up having questions, it might actually be helpful to walk through what the process was, because I think a lot of people are a little bit confused about what the process was and what this looks like now. So even if you wanted to share your screen and show it, that's fine too.
Okay, yeah, I think that's
just
a great idea.
Yeah. Because I don't know about anybody else, but sometimes we get a little lost in a large open source project and finding our way through is.
For sure. Could you please give me like a sharing access?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me make you a co-host.
Awesome. Okay. I am sharing my screen. All right, this is the 1.25 enhancement tracking sheet. As you can see, your classic archaic sheet, just like 70 or 60 something enhancement here. And so how this worked is that the SIG lead would put it into this tab right here, and then the enhancement team would pull it over to enhancements. And then this is a little bit risky because there's a lot of people using the sheet, and like things could be, accidentally deleted. And so what the change is now is we have move over to the tracking board. And so all of this is automated. What you can see is that a SIG lead will apply a label called lead opted in. If I can find it, this is quite a long, okay, here, yeah, mark apply label lead opted in because he's a SIG Windows lead. And so when the labels apply, we have a script in the background that's run twice a day. And this just pulls in all the caps automatically. And so what is going to change for most people if you are a enhancement author is just the change of view, right? Before you would go to the sheet and be like, how is my enhancement doing? Is everything good? Is everything tracked? Now it's just a different change of view. For a couple other stakeholders, things are going to change too. So for example, if you are a product readiness reviewer, now you're also using the sheet and you have your own tab. And then our docs and comms team will also be leveraging this sheet as well. One thing I do want to note though is before in this sheet, information like stage or SIG is manually added in. And now we use the enhancement issue as a single source of truth. So if you are a CAP author, just make sure that like all the tag here's are kept up to date because we do use it to update things like stage. So yeah, just make sure all the labels here are all good and the status and milestone is updated. And this is the enhancement team contact. So these are the people that is responsible for updating your enhancement status. I'll stop sharing and answer whatever questions people might have here.
Again, if you're uncomfortable unmuting, you're welcome to leave a note in chat and I'm watching and I will make sure you are heard, but otherwise feel free to unmute. You should be able to and ask questions.
So I guess one question is, who should they ping if they're encountering a problem?
That would be me.
Okay.
I will triage everything. And we do have, that's a great question. We do have a specific Slack channel called Release Enhancement. And we also have a Google group, forget what it's called, but it's mentioned at the bottom of the blog, how to reach out and contact us.
I think it's release-team-enhancements at kubernetes.io.
All right, thanks, Mark. Yeah, it's not, doesn't roll off the tongue, but.
I guess one other small thing is the Teams changes that occurred in KORG.
That's a good point. So if you are working directly, like you need edit permission to this board, there's a few stakeholders here that are given permission. And if you're given rec permission, you're given rec permission to the entire board. It's not like the sheet where it's like locked down to like, oh, you have access to one tab. So depending on like what teams you're working on, if you're comms, if you're docs, if you're PRR, we manage these access via the teams. And so how this works is like we give the PRR team right access. So we don't add individual people to the board. If you're under PRR, then you would go to KORG, edit that YAML file, and then that will give you access. Right, SIG leads should have their own group or team under the K-Org YAML as well. Yeah.
Any other questions? I do see a comment. This is amazing. So I think a lot of people are pretty excited about that that update. Anything that's automated saves us some time.
I think there's an inherent fear in members of the release team for the sheet that they would accidentally wipe everything out.
All right. And there's also a link to an email with more information. I'm going to copy that out of the chat here and just paste that into the notes if people would like to read more. That's an email, I'm assuming, to KDev, or no, sorry, it's to Kubernetes SIG release. So if you're interested in reading more, you'll be able to find that information there. All right. Any last questions, comments, things you would like to bring up around the new release enhancements process? All right. Good deal. Well, thank you so much, Grace. And hopefully folks find this extremely useful.
All right. Thank you for having me, Laura.
Our pleasure. All right. Up next, we need to talk a little bit about elections because there is an elections going on, and an update on how to vote. Do what you need to do for that. And for that, I have Caslin on the call. So Caslin, if you can come and kind of give us an overview and tell us a little bit about what we're doing with the current election and what our deadlines are and things like that.
Hello, hello. And we also have DIMS on, so got a couple of us here who are election officers. So hopefully I'm sharing my screen. Is that working correctly? Lovely.
We can see it.
Yes, perfect. Love it when that works. Good start. So I figured that we would walk through the elections repo. If you want to know anything about the steering committee election, that is the best place to go. We are also trying to send out comms on a timely basis to make sure that folks are aware of upcoming deadlines and all of that kind of stuff. So keep an eye on KDev for those emails. One went out this morning about the upcoming deadline this Friday, September 16th. Anywhere in the world, at the end of the day, anywhere in the world is the deadline for voting exceptions. So that is if you believe that you should be eligible to vote, but you're not automatically added as eligible to vote, you're not able to get into the stuff, you can let us know and we can evaluate your case so that we can make sure that you can vote. And so let's go over a little bit more about the election here. Yes, thank you. Dim's put the link to the email from this morning in the chat. Oh, and we should also put this link in the chat, which I can do. Oh, no, you already did. Lovely. So here is the voter's guide to the Kubernetes Steering Committee election. It's at Community Elections Steering 2022, if you ever need to find it. And it has useful information in it, such as the purpose of the election. So this year we are trying to fill 3 seats that are open for re-election right now. The Kubernetes Steering Committee consists of 7 members. So there are 4 members that are currently serving 2-year terms. So they have 1 year left in their terms. And then there are 3 members whose terms are ending. And those are the ones that are up for election. So if you go to the steering page, the 2022 page, it has a link to the steering committee information. So if you ever wanted to learn more about the steering committee, that's where you can find that. So this is the second year that we're using a tool called Electo to conduct the election. I have that open in another tab here, and I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. But it's an application that was commissioned by the CNCF to kind of make this whole election process a little bit smoother. It's pretty convenient. It'll allow you to see all the candidate information, though you can always also see the candidate information here in this repo if you needed to check it out. It's also one of the ways that we recommend to check if you are eligible, if you've been added automatically as a voter for the election. If you try to get into Electo and it says that you aren't eligible, that's one way that you can know that you might need to file what is the word? An exception with us to be able to vote. So there's a little bit of background here. And then, as I keep mentioning, the exceptions are due tomorrow. Here's how you find out what the eligibility rules are. It's people who have had at least 50 contributions to the Kubernetes project over the last year, according to a snapshot taken of the data that drives the dev stats board, if you've ever seen that. If you haven't seen that, here's a link to it, which is super cool. So it's a Grafana dashboard that can tell you all sorts of information about developer stats within the Kubernetes project. Checking to see if there's anything else important here. There's a voter exception form, which we mentioned. Here's some more information about voter exceptions, and here's the schedule. So that's the main thing that I want to go over here. So the steering committee election has begun. Candidate nominations have concluded. All of the candidate information is in the tool. We're currently in the stage where election voting is open. So the deadline to submit those exception requests, again, is tomorrow, Friday, September 16th, anywhere in the world. And the election actually closes September 29th, anywhere in the world. And then you'll hear about the announcement of the results at the beginning of October. Alrighty, so that's the basics. You know where to find them now. Keep an eye on KDev to make sure that you know what's going on. So here's what it looks like if you try to log into Electo, which is at elections.k8s.io. So you can sign in with GitHub. Oh yeah, and there's also a list of, so yeah, the YAML that we use to determine who is eligible to vote uses your GitHub ID, thus the connection to GitHub. Oh, wow, it automatically logged in since I've logged in before. That's nice. So here's what it looks like when you log in. And then you can see the elections that are in progress that you're eligible to vote for. For me, that's the steering committee election, of course. And then you get this page with a little bit of information about the election and the list of candidates. So if you go to click on any of these, I wonder if you click on the name, yep, it gives you all the information that you would also find in that repo that we were just looking at. So for example, for Bob Killen, who I'm going to pick on because he's in the call and spoke earlier. He's a member of State Contribex, member of the steering committee, who is going for re-election. You can see some information about the kinds of work that he has contributed to the project, as well as some information about what he wants to do by becoming a member of the steering committee for another term. So there's that kind of information for each of the candidates. And you can go back here and click on a different candidate and check out more information. You can, so the way that this voting works, by the way, is ranked choice voting. So you'll want to put in order which ones you want to see. So here's what that looks like. You click on vote, you'll see the list of candidates, and you can select what order you would like them to be placed in for your order of preference for who becomes members of the steering committee. And that's pretty much how it works. You submit your vote when you're done, and it shouldn't take you too terribly long, depending on how slowly you read and how much you want to read all of the information, which I like to do. So it'll take me a little bit longer, that's for sure. But that's about it. Can you rank multiple people with the same rank? Let's see. Yes, it looks like you can, because all of these are 8 right now, and I think I could submit that. So I believe, yes, you can. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. Yep. Everyone's agreeing. Yes,
And
lower
one
number is
thing
higher
that-
preference. Good
Okay,
point.
you got that. Cool.
Yeah. It was a good comment in the chat.
Yes, I am adding that to the notes. One, I think there was a question that I missed in there. There you
Yeah,
go.
someone mentioned that you can also drag them around to set up the numbers. And that is true. Pretty cool tool. Yep, and DIMS is updating in the chat. We have about 125 votes in so far, which is a relatively small component of the total list of folks who are eligible. So if you haven't voted yet, make sure you get those in. Reach out to us if you have any questions. Can you render the names as their GitHub ID names instead of like their legal names? I have a hard time remembering legal names when I mostly see GitHub names. That is a fair point. I definitely have that issue sometimes. You do see their GitHub names here. So you can see that there, but it is not on the voting page. So it's a fair point. Noted. Passphrase is something you may need to remember to change your vote. It helps to prevent the admin from seeing your vote. Yeah, so make sure that you do use that passphrase setting capability here at the bottom.
And I just mentioned that so you can vote early, and then don't worry that you will be able to change your vote later.
Important. Thank you. All right. Any other questions?
Vote early, vote often. Not really.
I guess you can actually. You can change your vote. It'll still only count as one vote.
So something just to note that Bob mentioned in the chat is that there's probably about like 700 or so valid voters. So, socialize this out to your various groups. Please tell everybody, hey, double check if you're available to vote. Make sure you put your vote in. Make your voice heard so that you can do it. If you don't know some folks, that's okay. You can go and review what they've done and make a decision from there. You don't necessarily have to know all of these people to get your vote in.
And DevStats doesn't count everything. It's always a shock to me when I log into this tool and it knows that I do things. So if you're one of those folks who does things that you wouldn't think would be checked by DevStats, make sure that you're checking that today so that you can get the exceptions in. We can make sure that you can vote based on the types of contributions you make to the project.
All right. Any other questions that maybe we missed in the chat? Because there was a lot of back and forth, which is always good. There's some docs that DIMS dropped in there. I'm going to copy those into the notes if you have questions about Electo itself. But anybody have any other questions? Also, there's a SIG Contravex elections channel. If you run into any issues, if you have any questions, they're friendly folks if you haven't figured that out. So reach out, ask questions. That's what it's all about. So
more than happy to help you help your project.
Are we sounding too much like an infomercial for all y'all?
That was the goal.
Yes. Okay. Nice job. All right. If anybody else has any more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. But I do want to move on to the next one. So thank you very much, Haslin and DIMS, for all the information. Bob also just mentioned that if you want to use Electo for your SIG, you can do that. It is available for that. I imagine they could reach out to the elections group if they have questions. Yes.
Yep, there is an entire election sub-project with a group of owners that can help facilitate that sort of thing.
All right, so that's not just for steering, that's for every election across the org. Well, that's I learn something new every day. So there we go. Okay, folks, let's kind of move on here. I'm not sure if Christoph could make it, but Madav, you're here. If you're available and it's not too late for you, we have a applying triage labels and removing the needs triage status. Are you up to speaking about it this late?
Yeah, I'm not sure why my. Oops. Okay,
It's
yeah,
okay.
there you go.
If your video doesn't come in, that's all right.
Hi. So this is just a small change, not a small change, but a change that we'd like some more feedback on from the community. This will also go out as an email to KDev, but since we're all here. Earlier this week, Christoph, who is one of the current technical leads for SIG contributor experience, opened up a PR, which essentially changes certain aspects of the triage process that is in place right now. So a little bit of context as to how things were up until now. Every issue or PR that is opened gets applied with a needs triage label. And each SIG has their own process of triaging issues and triaging PRs subsequently. Till now, what used to happen is to get rid of the needs triage label, you would need to apply a triage accepted label. And to apply that label, you need to be an org member of one of the Kubernetes orgs. That being said, there are also other types of triage labels that exist in the Kubernetes umbrella, some of them being triage unresolved, triage needs information, and there are a couple more as well. Till now, what used to happen is the needs triage label would not go away unless you applied the accepted label on it. And there were a few reasons for it up until now. But since the triage process has evolved and has sort of morphed into independent processes per SIG, this change, what it does is any triage label now basically gets rid of the needs triage label on an issue or a SIG. And more importantly, the PR that is linked in the notes also adds a few bots, which does a periodic sweep of any closed issues or PRs with this particular label. The reason being, if they are closed, is it safe to assume that it has been triaged in some form? So right now, if a PR is closed but not merged, the bot applies a triage unresolved label on it. If a PR is closed and merged, the bot applies a triage accepted label on it because it was merged. And that should give certain amount of confidence that triage accepted, it probably is triage accepted, and subsequently for issues as well. But since this changes the triage process in some aspects, I'm here to talk. I'm here to talk a little bit about that and basically start getting feedback on it. This will also go out as a mail to KDev for asynchronous feedback as well. So any feedback, concerns, or comments to start off with, as while we are on call, would be great and very welcome.
All right, y'all, you know the drill. You can either type into the chat or unmute yourself and ask some questions.
So, for some background context, when this was first rolled out, there was discussion about, this exact situation. And the way the conversations were going back then were they wanted triage accepted to be separate from the other triage labels and sort of like always be that specific thing be the thing to remove the needs triage label. But, things change with time.
All right, in the chat, someone says that's great. It's really hard to wait for the acceptance of triage. If the issue is not valid, then we have the option to close the issue. Solid observation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what the bot, the lifecycle bot also does. So if an issue is stale or for about 90 days or so without any activity, it auto closes issues. And extending from that, the new bots which are being added, basically the only thing it does additionally to that is just apply a triage unresolved label, so that, if you were to filter and search for issues or PRs on GitHub, you wouldn't get extra noise there. There are ways to sort of get rid of the noise, but for the sake of more completeness here.
Good deal. Anybody have any more questions or comments? There's a thank you in the chat for working on it. It's definitely an important update that needs to happen for us to be able to get things done. All right. Well, thank you for the update and the information. I'm sure if folks have more, I'm just watching the chat to make sure someone isn't typing slowly, and I'm giving folks a chance to comment. But if you want to comment on the PR as well, you certainly can. You can also probably reply to that email when it goes out to KDev to start talking about what to do here, if there's any concerns that come up as you're working through everything there. But I'm not seeing any comments, so thank you so much for the update and the information, context, stuff like that. Also, just as a note, in addition to KDev, please also include the leads list. So just a note there. All right, folks, we are roughly at the end of our agenda. If anybody has any topic that we did not cover that you would very much like to talk about with the community, I'm going to leave everybody open to raise your hand for me and just let me know that you want to talk about something specific. Or leave a note in the chat, that works too. I'll also say the live transcription system seems to have issues with how I speak, which is entertaining. Anyway, on that note, there are a bunch of shout outs that I suggest you go take a look at in the notes, just because I have a lot from 2 months worth. There's been a lot of really great stuff going on. So if you want to also shout out anybody in your org or in your SIG, please go on to the shout outs channel on Slack. Everybody loves a little bit of call out for all of the hard work that they put into the project. That being said, thank you all so much for joining us. And this concludes our monthly community meeting for September 2022. Take care, folks.